Welcome. Welcome to the Cardano Governance Basics webinar. My name is Nicolas Cerny. I'm the governance lead at the Cardano Foundation, and it is my pleasure today to talk about the Cardano governance fundamentals. So what we'll be covering today is an overview of the different governance roles, the different action types, the governance action types, and then also to look at the decision-making process of these governance decisions. So to give a brief introduction about governance, Cardano is moving towards full decentralization through this on-chain governance transformation. While we currently already have the networking side and the operations side of the blockchain being fully decentralized, now we're also transitioning this governance model to this fully decentralized system. Very important to mention, the community, the ecosystem participants, they are at the center of this governance model. And then, just to be completely correct, the standard of this governance model is defined via a Cardano improvement proposal. That's what CIP stands for. And the number of that is 1694. And 1694 is basically the year when Voltaire was born. So that's a little Easter egg. And yeah, in this standard in CIP 1694, the entire governance model is outlined and explained. So yeah, that's about the introduction. And then let's dive into the governance roles. They are, of course, the key players in the decision-making process. And I will start with one role that is usually not talked about that much and is not one of the three that is usually mentioned the most. But of course, when we talk about the decision-making of Cardano and this governance model, we need to talk about the ADA holders, because the ADA holders are at the core of this new governance model in Cardano. They are the ones who are delegating their voting power, either to a delegated representative of their choice. They themselves can decide to register as a delegated representative. And then, of course, right, they are also the ones who are delegating to the stake pool operators, who are also playing a vital role, not just when it comes to the operation of the network, but also now in the governance of this network. And of course, ADA holders are the ones who can submit these governance actions, these governance proposals that I have mentioned before. And of course, they need a deposit for that. The second role are the delegated representatives, DReps for short. And they are the ones, as I mentioned, who are representing the ADA holders' interests. And they are the ones who are voting and making decisions, basically. So ADA holders, so DReps basically act and the ADA holders are delegating to them. The DReps, right, their job is to discuss, propose and vote on these governance actions. So how do they do that? Well, they vote obviously on chain. So they submit their votes via the blockchain in a transaction. They can vote yes, no, or abstain on governance actions. And very importantly to mention, their voting power is proportional to the ADA delegated to them. All DReps, when they register on chain, they start with zero delegation, with zero voting power. And only after they register, ADA holders, as mentioned before, can delegate to them. So they all start with zero, and then, of course, it depends how the ADA holders and how much they delegate to this DRep. And who can be a DRep, right? We are on a public permissionless blockchain, and these principles are also what we see and what we discover here on this governance model on Cardano. And so anyone that wishes can become a delegated representative on chain. The only thing that is required is that they have the 500 ADA deposit that is currently required to register as a DRep. And for those who already know about Cardano and know about how the stake pool operator model works, it's basically also works very similarly. So stake pool operators, they also need to register on chain, and they also need a deposit of 500 ADA. And the DRep system borrows a lot from how the stake pool operators currently works on Cardano. And, right, it doesn't need to be me or you or anyone else that registers as a DRep. It can also be a native script or a Bluetooth script. So a smart contract, you can imagine in the future some smart contract that is a DRep that can vote maybe with an integrated AI, LLM model. I mean, the possibilities are endless, and that's also the beauty of this system, right? That we right now probably cannot think of all the possibilities that this governance model and the technology on Cardano allows us. Good. And then of course, also another very important role in this governance world on Cardano is the Constitutional Committee. And they are the embodiment, if you really want to break it down, of the Cardano Constitution. And we'll come a bit later to the Constitution and what that means. But the Constitutional Committee, they are the ones who need to make sure that all the governance actions on chain are adhering to the Cardano Constitution. So they are enforcing that the governance actions submitted on Cardano, and when I talk about governance actions, you can think about, for example, a parameter change or a treasury withdrawal, things like that. And we'll go into a bit detail about the actions later. So they need to make sure that these actions do not infringe the Constitution. So they need to make sure that they adhere to that. Very important to also emphasize that the Constitutional Committee, they cannot make decisions just based on their gut and do whatever they want. No, they can be replaced. They can be voted out and replaced by the other roles within this governance model. So it's not that once you become a Constitutional Committee member, you're it for life, you're a Constitutional Committee member until your term is over. No, at all times you can be replaced by the delegated representative and by the stake pool operators in case you do not do your job correctly. And then, of course, the Constitutional Committee, as I said, they have a specific term length that is specified in the Genesis file, so in the parameter file where the different governance parameters are specified. In there, the Constitutional Committee has a specific time slot, so it's provided there as an epoch number until the Constitutional Committee basically can serve. And after that, after we pass that epoch, for example, let's say currently we have epoch 100 and the term length is until epoch 200. That means at the epoch boundary 200, they will not be able to vote anymore, and they will have to be either re-elected or changed. And the Constitutional Committee, the voting power is one committee member has one vote. So if we have a committee size of 7, as it's currently with the interim Constitutional Committee, one member of that group has one vote. And the majority required to pass a Constitutional Committee vote is also specified as a parameter. Good. And then the last but not least important role within this governance model of Cardano are, of course, the stake pool operators. As I mentioned, their primary role, of course, is to operate and keep the network running. And next to that, they also now have to vote on very specific governance actions, especially security-related governance actions, and of course the hard fork initiation governance action, and as I mentioned, also the governance actions that have something to do with the Constitutional Committee. So the SPOs are also a check on the power of the Constitutional Committee. Their voting rights is also proportional to the ADA delegated to the pool. So imagine we have a stake pool right now that has they currently have a saturation of 50 million ADA that is delegated to the pool that you can see on Pool PM or on AdaStat, Cardano Scan, Pool Tool, Sea Explorer. I hope I mentioned all the explorers right now. And that is the voting power that is then proportional to them. So 50 million ADA delegated means the voting power is 50 million ADA. They, of course, also need to represent their delegators, right? The stake pool operators are also, they need to make sure that the interests of their delegators are represented, and of course that the security of the protocol is always, at the center of their decision making. And then really to again one time highlight that the SPOs hold the Constitutional Committee accountable, and they need to ensure that the Constitutional Committee follows the Constitution. And if they don't, together with the DReps, they can replace them and vote them out. Good, so that was about the governance roles. And now we got to talk about the governance action types. So the actions, the proposals that shape Cardano's governance. And here in this overview, you can see all 7 types of these governance actions, a short description, and also when they were adopted. And adopted means when they were implemented. And we'll go into them into more detail in a bit, but it's important to mention that right now, on September 30th, 2024, we are after the Chang 1 hard fork. So we are in this phase between Chang 1 and Chang +1. And that phase is the bootstrapping phase. That's how it's called. And here, after Chang 1, right now, 3 governance action types are available. And those are the hard fork initiation. So, that's a very obvious one that is required for the protocol to transition to the next phase. It basically triggers a non-backwards compatible upgrade to the network. And of course, it requires that the stake pool operators have upgraded their software, their node software before that. We need that, obviously, to transition even and to even think and be able to do Chang +1. Yeah, very obvious. And then another one that is possible and available are the protocol parameter changes. And the description here is that any change to one or more updatable protocol parameters, excluding changes to the major protocol version, because a major protocol version bump increase would be considered a hard fork initiation. This is necessary, right, in case that there's an emergency and we might need to change a protocol parameter. So that's why also this governance action type is available. And then the third governance action type are the info governance actions. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. The motion of no confidence governance action. This is the action that I mentioned before that replaces the Constitutional Committee. To be precise, it removes the currently installed Constitutional Committee, and once passed, so once this governance action has been successfully ratified and enacted, a new Constitutional Committee needs to be put in place. This is a really drastic move, right? If the current Constitutional Committee is replaced, that means that DReps and SPOs reached a majority and decided, that the Constitutional Committee did something so wrong that they need to be all voted out. So all members need to be replaced. That's the motion of no confidence. The second governance action that is talking about the Constitutional Committee is the update committee and or threshold and or terms. Yes, it's a bit of a tongue twister, but it's also a very important governance action. Because with this one, you can update the committee, which means you can replace 1 member or 2 members, or how many members you want, basically. You can change the threshold, so the parameter that specifies what majority level you need for an approval. For example, right, you can have the threshold of a simple majority, or you can have the threshold of a 2/3 majority, things like that. And then the terms, what that specifies is the length of how long a constitutional committee member can serve. So for example, right now we have the constitutional committee that is specified and has a term until epoch 580. I'm now really talking about the Cardano mainnet. So the current interim constitutional committee has a term length according to the Conway Genesis file until epoch 580. And with this governance action, that could be changed. And then also, very importantly, as I mentioned, this also requires a vote from the DReps and the SPOs. And then also another, the third governance action type we're talking about, that is the new constitution or guardrail script. And what that does, right, here we're talking about the Cardano constitution. And if you want to change it, if you want to amend something to it, this governance action type is required. And as you accurately found out, it's also not just about the constitution, we're also talking about the guardrail script. And the guardrail script, that is an on-chain Pluto script that basically ensures that specific parameters cannot be changed out of a specific bound. So you have a max and a min boundary that specific parameters cannot be changed. So for example, if we talk about the block size cannot be set to 100 gigabytes, or it cannot be 1 byte. So there are boundaries within these different parameters can be set, right? That is to ensure that everything works fine, that we do not break the blockchain. And in order to change this guardrail script, you also need to do a governance action. And currently, the constitution and the guardrail script are all referenced in the Conway Genesis file. So you can see there a hash of the constitution, and even I think the link to the constitution, and of course also to the script, right? So when you do a parameter change, you need to reference this guardrail script in order to do that. But that's maybe a bit too technical. And then the fourth governance action type is the hard fork initiation. And this, as I mentioned before, initiates a non-backwards compatible upgrade of the network. And the prerequisite in order to do that is, of course, that the stake pool operators have upgraded their software, they're upgraded to a new node version that is available. And yeah, this is a governance action that all three roles, so the DReps, SPOs, and the Constitutional Committee needs to approve. And then the protocol parameter changes, the very important governance action type. Here, this is required to adjust protocol parameters, for example, like block size or fees or any of the other over 100 parameters that exist. And here it's very important to mention that also for security related parameter changes, the approval of the stake pool operators is required. And protocol parameter changes, right, that requires, of course, that there is a lot of testing, there's a lot of modeling done before a governance action like that is even submitted. Because the implications that parameter changes can have on the environment and their basically the entire system is something that should not be taken lightly, right? Good. And then also a very I think the most discussed governance action type are, of course, the treasury withdrawals. And here, what are we talking about here? So here, they are about allocating funds from the Cardano treasury for ecosystem development. So treasury withdrawals, they require as well a majority vote from DReps and the Constitutional Committee. And treasury withdrawals, similar to the way all the other governance action types, right? They need to be discussed first off-chain. They need to be really socialized, and before they can be submitted, there needs to be a lot of community involvement. And yeah. And then the last governance action type, and a very special one, are the info governance actions. And this is the only governance action that does not have an on-chain effect. So all the other ones that I mentioned before, they directly affect the protocol. So if we think about parameter changes, or if we think about a hard fork, or even a treasury withdrawal, something happens on-chain, right? If that proposal is successful, if the majorities are obtained and it is ratified and then enacted. For the info governance actions, it's a bit different. So in that case, an info action, it records information on-chain without causing direct on-chain effects. So that is a fancy way of saying an info action is basically like a poll, like a survey, more like a poll actually. And the interesting thing about that is that it enables anyone that submits that to really measure the sentiment of the community on this specific issue that was put forth in this action, right? So currently on Cardano, we have 2 governance actions that are available on mainnet that have been issued, and both of them are info actions. And one of them is asking the community if they want to name the future hard fork the Hosky hard fork. And so far, I think the DReps and the SPOs are not really in favor of that. So if you just look at the stats of that, and I can highly recommend to look at the different explorers, they all showcase that, how the different roles vote. And then the second governance action, the info action that's on mainnet currently, is also talking about, basically thanking the Genesis entities for how far Cardano has come. And of course, right, there you can see the difference that is possible via the info action. So you can have a direct question, or you can have also just a statement. And you can check out the link here where you can review the governance actions that are currently available. And here, just a breakdown of who can vote on what. So you can again see the 7 governance action types, and then the 3 roles that vote on the governance actions. And right, very importantly, so the Constitutional Committee, they can vote on everything besides the actions that directly affect them. So in case they need to be replaced, the entire committee needs to be replaced, or only one member, or a threshold, or a term length needs to be changed, then they don't have a say, right? Because that would be a bit contradictory. The delegated representative, on the other hand, as you can see, they can vote on all the different governance action types. And then the stake pool operators, they can also vote on quite a few governance action types. And very importantly, I think you all probably are wondering what's going on with the protocol parameter changes and the SPOs. Why is there an X and a check mark? Well, that's the case because stake pool operators, they vote on the protocol parameter changes that are security related. So think about the block size or the min fee. So on every security related parameter, not just the CC and the DReps need to vote, but also the stake pool operators. Good. And then, of course, the actions where every role needs to vote, as mentioned before, is the hard fork initiation. and then the security-related protocol parameters. And the info action, as we now know, right, there is no effect on chain, but everyone can vote, everyone can give their opinion. So also something very important to keep in mind. And now let's talk about the decision-making process and how that works. So how are governance actions submitted, voted on, and acted? And yeah, let's look at that. So the life cycle, in my opinion, can be split into 4 parts. We have the off-chain discussion, the actual submission of the governance action, the voting, and the enactment. But let's start with the off-chain discussion. So the biggest part about Cardano governance, or in general, if we talk about governance, not just on Cardano, but in general, is the discussions that happen before a proposal is put forth, right? So here, that includes everything that can mean discussions on X, discussions on a specific Discord, in the Cardano forum, or wherever people talk about specific issues. Telegram, Reddit, right? I mean, I can name now probably 100 channels and we would spend the rest of the hour talking about that. But here, really, it's the discussions that take place before an action is actually submitted on chain. And very importantly, right, during these off-chain discussions, you start with an idea, but then you find already coalitions, you find like-minded individuals that also share your understanding of how important that issue is. So let's just do an example. I want to change the block size to, I don't know, something higher. So in that case, right, let's just say now I will try to submit the governance action on chain, but before that I have never socialized it, I have never talked about it with anyone, I haven't even done good research about it. Yeah, so I just submit it on chain and then nobody votes for my proposal, right? Of course, I'm sad. It's not pleasant. Nobody votes for it. Nobody likes me. But what does that mean? It doesn't mean that nobody likes me. It means that I was not able to correctly socialize it and to even understand if the community thinks that this is a good idea. So that needs to be done ideally, right? Of course, it can happen at the same time as well. But ideally, that happens already before the action is submitted on chain. That you're already aware of, okay, I already have a good idea about if it works or not. You can even think about doing an info governance action before you do your parameter change or your treasury withdrawal or whatever. You can do an info action as a temperature check, right? So off-chain discussion, let's say in my example now, I did that and that worked really well. I found like-minded individuals in Intersect and in the Cardano forum, on Reddit. Everyone supports that idea. And then something that I also have to mention, to submit the governance action on Cardano, you currently require a deposit amount. And that deposit amount at the moment is at 100,000 ADA. And if I have that 100,000 ADA, right, it's a deposit, so you'll get it back. There are, of course, opportunity costs in case when you submit the action, you do not get the staking rewards anymore during that time. So here, right, I submit the governance action on chain. In our example, it was the parameter change. Okay, and as soon as that governance action was submitted on chain, the delegated representatives and the constitutional committee, and in case the security-related parameter, the SPOs can also vote on that. And currently that voting window is defined via a protocol parameter. So it's currently 6 epochs. That is the time when the lifetime of a proposal once submitted on chain. And during that time, the proposal now is able to collect the necessary votes from these different roles. So it has 6 epochs to collect the votes from the delegated representatives, the constitutional committee, and the stake pool operators. Good. So that is the voting phase. And then, let's say, in this example, I was still not able to convince everyone about my proposal. I'm not able to convince the delegated representative, so I do not meet that threshold. That means that after 6 epochs, right, I wasn't able to do that. After 6 epochs, the proposal expires. And that means that the 100,000 ADA deposit that I had to come up with, that is returned to me, or more specifically to the address that I provided. And then, I can do it again if I want to or not. And then I'll do it again. I was able to even find more people that support my cause. And then after, let's say, 5 epochs, I was able to convince people, and the necessary majorities were reached. Then the proposal is ratified. So yes, I have the DRep approval and the Constitutional Committee approval. Very good. Then, very important to mention, governance actions are checked for, they're checked at the epoch boundary if they meet the required thresholds. So only at the epoch boundary between the epochs, the proposals are checked. And in my case, it worked. So at the epoch boundary, it's checked, it's successful, nice, it's ratified. And then 1 epoch later, so just 1 epoch later, the proposal is enacted. Yeah, very important to mention. And so to really summarize it one more time, the life cycle is split into 4 parts. You have the off-chain discussion, the submission, the voting phase, and then the enactment phase. And then, of course, there is a prioritization and order of enactment of governance actions. So actions that have been ratified in the current epoch are prioritized as follows for enactment, right? So first is the motion of no confidence. Then you have updated committee threshold, followed by new constitutional guardrail script, hard fork initiation, protocol parameter changes, and treasury withdrawals last. And of course, governance actions are enacted in order of acceptance to the chain. And this resolves conflicts where, for example, there are 2 competing parameter changes. So in case there are 2 parameter changes about the same parameter, let's just say the block size, someone wants to increase that and someone wants to lower that, and both of them are ratified at the same epoch boundary, then the one that was submitted first is enacted and the one that was later on will be dropped. Good. And then, of course, where are we now when we talk about this governance transition on Cardano? And where did we come from? So currently on this timeline, you can see we are after the Chang 1 hard fork. And just to quickly go back in time, CIP 1694, it was released in November of 2022. And there was a lot of discussion when it came to this CIP. I think it was the Cardano improvement proposal that was discussed the most. I remember it was a pull request on the GitHub repo for, was it a year or even more than a year? And it had over 500 or more comments. So there was a lot of discussion happening in GitHub on this pull request. And of course, we did not just have this pull request, but there were also numerous workshops that took place all over the world, the CIP 1694 workshops. I hosted one in Zug. There were other workshops all over the world, and it was super successful. And we were able, as a community, to collect massive amounts of input. And if you look at the proposal, the CIP 1694 in November, and then you took a look at it after July 2023, it was changed. It dramatically changed. Lots of ideas were introduced, lots of new interesting mechanisms. I mean, the one thing that always comes to my mind is the info governance action that was initially not part of the whole concept, but which I think is a very brilliant idea of how you can measure community sentiment. And yeah, of course, right, in July 2023, Intersect MBO was launched. And yeah, in the beginning of September of 2024, the first Chang hard fork took place. And as mentioned before, right, the first few features of this new governance model on Cardano went live. And the Genesis keys that previously were required to, basically do governance on Cardano, they do not matter anymore. They have become obsolete. And we are now in the age of Voltaire, where the community is at the center of the decision-making process. And to look ahead a bit of what's coming next, of course, as I mentioned before, it's the second Chang hard fork that then fully turns on the entire governance model. So all the other interesting governance action types that we discovered today will be available then. So think about the motion of no confidence, the update to the committee, the treasury withdrawals. And that is something that is also very, very crucial and important to talk about. And then in December, we will also see the Constitutional Convention in Buenos Aires, where we as a community and our representatives that were elected via the workshops that are currently going on, they will define a Cardano constitution and ideally come up with a draft that then still needs to be approved by the community. So whatever the people in Buenos Aires come up with, that still needs to go through the governance process that we just discussed. So it still needs to be provided in a update constitution governance action, and then it needs to be voted on by the different roles that we just discussed. So very, very important to mention. And then ideally, sometimes early next year, we ideally ratify this constitution, as I mentioned right now, via governance action. And then, of course, it's not the end of governance, it's just the beginning. The cool thing about CIP 1694 and the model that we're implementing on Cardano is that we're able to adapt and change, that we can, tackle future challenges head on and adapt our system and make it better. Because right now it's a minimal viable governance model, but in the future we can change and improve it. So that is always a possibility and something we should strive for. Yeah, and then as I mentioned, the Cardano Constitution, also a super important document that basically describes and provides information about how this whole governance model works. So we have CIP 1694 that provides the technical understanding and the standards of how this governance model works. But the Cardano Constitution, that is the guiding document that, as I mentioned here, should guide the governance decisions. The Constitutional Committee, they need to ensure that the governance actions on chain follow this constitution, that they adhere to the constitution. And it clearly defines and specifies the rules and the governance, the checks and balances within the system. As I mentioned here, right, the Constitutional Committee, they are the ones who are looking and need to ensure that the actions adhere to the constitution. But of course, the same applies ideally to the DReps and the stake pool operators. So we all follow the constitution. And then amendments to the constitution, it's also very important. As I mentioned, with the system itself, we also might have to change the constitution, right? The unknown unknowns of the future is something that, of course, we don't know. So we need to be able to also change the constitution itself, like we're able to change the protocol itself. Yeah. So, and now very importantly, how can you as an individual, as an enterprise, as a whatever you identify with, can participate? So here I wrote down 5 options of how you can participate. let's talk first about the, let's say, on-chain perspectives of how you can participate. So you can, as an ADA holder, right, you have the power to delegate your voting power to a DRep or to a stake pool operator. And very importantly here, if I say delegate your voting power to a stake pool operator, you do that by the conventional way of delegating to a stake pool. You just need to consider that your delegation now also implies that you give this stake pool your voting power, basically. Then, of course, you can decide to register as a delegated representative, or you can decide you want to maybe get together with a group of friends or with a group of like-minded individuals, maybe even in your local community. You can choose to become a delegated representative via a multi-sig, or maybe even in the future with a smart contract, with a Pluto-script. Things like that are possible. You can also participate in governance by running a stake pool, by operating a stake pool. You are now participating in governance. So for those SPOs that don't know yet, yeah, you are now participating in governance. And then, of course, the last of the 4 ways how you can participate on chain is by submitting governance actions. So you can, as I said before, if you have the 100,000 ADA deposit, you can issue and create a governance action and submit it on chain. But then there's one other point. And I have highlighted that for a reason, because in my opinion, it's one of the most important, if not the most important part of this, how to get involved in governance. And that is participating in the discussions, participating in the democratic process on Cardano, right? And that is something that anyone can do, even without ADA. You can participate in the discussions on X, on Reddit, on the forum, on Telegram, wherever you find people to talk to, right? Even off-chain, you can do that in the real world, right? So this is something that is very important, to become active, to educate yourself and others about what's going on. Because this governance model that we're implementing on Cardano, as I said, the community is at the core. And ideally, we have an informed, an educated, and mature ecosystem participants that are able to make informed, well-informed decisions. So that's why it is so important to participate in the discussions and also to really think about what's going on. And yeah, form your own opinions. Very important. Yeah, and for a short conclusion, so Cardano's governance model is really designed to ensure fair, transparent, and community-driven decision-making. And as I mentioned, that can evolve, that can change, right? We started with a minimal viable governance model, but the possibilities are endless. And as the ecosystem evolves, every ADA holder has the opportunity to shape the blockchain's future through voting, delegation, and participation. The successful implementation of CIP 1694 will bring us really closer to a fully decentralized system where governance actions and decisions reflect the will of the entire community. So really get involved today by participating in the discussions, by becoming a DRep, registering as a DRep, delegating your ADA, and yeah, also join a stake pool and contribute to the discussions. Together, we can build a blockchain that is governed by its people, for its people. Good, thank you very much. And now we have some time for some questions. So if you have any questions, you can either post them directly and we can go through them. And I can see there is one discussion from M. Marsh, and he's asking, do we have an official place to have the off-chain discussion like CIPs in the GitHub? Yes, so when it comes to off-chain discussions, the beauty is that there is no official place to do that, because that in some ways would also be kind of a bottleneck, right? Because if there's only one platform where you can talk about specific ideas or governance actions, that would be a bit contradictory. So the official place, there are a few where you can talk about governance actions. There is the Gov tool, where we shared the link earlier. There is a proposal discussion forum where people can talk about ideas that have not yet been submitted as an actual governance action. So it's more like an idea forum where you can talk about that. But besides that, of course, there is the Cardano forum. There is on X, you can talk about ideas and find people to talk to. And any other place that provides you the option to post messages, basically. Good. Exactly. And then, of course, one thing that I would also really like to quickly give a shout out to and talk about is that, right, sometimes it can feel kind of overwhelming if you are not involved in Cardano 24/7. A lot of things are going on, and sometimes it might be hard to see, what governance action is currently available and what's happening. So one really nice tool that can be used that I also leverage is RYP. There you get push notifications if you get a governance action, if a governance action is submitted on chain, and if, for example, there's other notifications. So whenever, as I mentioned, the second governance action that was submitted on chain, right, I got a push notification as an email, and you can really easily see what's going on. Yeah, so that is one place how you can find these governance actions. Yeah, and if you have a question, you can leave them in the comments. I'll also check it out now on the live stream on X. But yeah, I mean, one of the things I also get asked usually a lot is how can I participate? Like, what's the best channel that I should join where I can get really good updates about what's going on with governance? And one of the best news sources when we talk about Cardano governance, for me personally, is the Intersect newsletters. So for those who don't know, Intersect is a member-based organization on Cardano. And they're focused on a lot of different things, and their newsletters that are sent out weekly provide a great overview of what's going on, not just in the governance space, but also if we talk about the constitutional workshops that are currently ongoing and a lot of other things. Yeah, and there's an interesting question. What are the biggest threats to Cardano now that governance is on the path to decentralization? That's a very good question. So the biggest threats, right, in my opinion, is that we do not have, as I mentioned before, this educated and well-informed community that is able to tackle the difficult questions that lie ahead. So what does that mean? For example, if we talk about the future prioritization of the Cardano roadmap, or what even should be considered for the Cardano roadmap, that is something that needs to be decided by the community, by the delegated representatives, by the stake pool operators, by the ecosystem, basically. So ideally, you have a community that is well informed and that can make decisions and confident decisions. So very important to keep that in mind. Another threat, of course, is that right now that we are transitioning into this full governance model. I would not call it a threat, but a possibility is that specific governance parameters might need to be tweaked, right? You can only predict the future so much. There might be challenges ahead that need to be tackled. But the good thing is that with this governance model that we're implementing, there are ways how to deal with that. So there is always the possibility, right, that things might need to change. Yeah, and then there's a question. How are preview and pre-prod test nets governed? That's an excellent question. So the preview and pre-prod are Cardano testnets, and they have the same on-chain governance model implemented as mainnet right now. So they are both currently also in this Chang 1 governance model. So they're also in this bootstrapping phase, and they're also governed as the other networks by the stake pool operators, the DReps, and the constitutional committee. And then when we have Chang +1, right, when we transition to the full governance model as described in CIP 1694, then the other governance action types, the 4 additional governance action types, are also available in these test nets. And then they are also governed the same way as mainnet. Yeah, very, very good question. Good. Yeah, so if you have one more question or a comment, leave them as a comment to the live stream, and I can make sure to answer them. Cheers from Norway, yeah, Crypto Labs. I see that you guys have a constitutional workshop coming up, and also the Cardano Summit, and I wish you also all the best of luck. And one thing I also want to mention, it's not a question, but if you have not yet participated in one of the constitutional workshops that are currently taking place, you can do so. You can check out all of these workshops at the dedicated Luma page, and there you can find all the different workshops that are close to you. It's now linked here, so you go to lu.ma/constitution, and there you can find all the workshops that are still taking place, and I really highly recommend that you check it out. It's a great way how you can provide input to the Cardano Constitution, and how you can also make sure that your voice is heard. And of course, you can meet like-minded individuals that really share, that you can get to know better, and that share your interest for Cardano. And then I also want to share the feedback form for the Cardano Constitution, because you might not be able to participate in person at the workshop, but you still want to provide input. You can do that via a dedicated Google form. I now just realized that it's not really nice to copy or easy to click, but there is a way how you can directly provide your input and feedback via this form. So in case that you don't have the time to participate in a workshop, you can fill out this form. And of course, yes, there will also be a workshop taking place in Vienna at the 12th of October that I'll be hosting, and I'll be joined by many, many great community members, and I'm already looking forward to that. And Simon is one of them. That's fantastic. Good. But if there are no further questions, I just again want to say thank you for taking the time to learn about Cardano governance, to learn about what is shaping this future governance model. So the different roles, the governance action types, and also the decision-making process. And if I can give you one recommendation or one piece of advice, is that you really join the discussions, that you become active, that you educate yourself when it comes to governance, because we need an educated and well-informed community to make good decisions and go into this future and be prepared for what's to come. But I'm confident that we'll achieve that, and thank you so much, and I'll see you soon. Take care.